Yo, what is up guys, Ghost here, welcome back to Stormgate Central. Today I've got a bit of a news roundup video for you guys. There's a lot of stuff to go over here, a lot of new things that have come out over the past few days. I've been out in the countryside touching grass with the family, but I'm back now, so we're going to run over all of this. There are some campaign concerns that the community have had. A lot of those have been addressed now by Tim Campbell, the game director for Stormgate. There's also a brand new patch for Stormgate, and then there is a brand new stats page actually over on Untapped.gg to help you improve your play. All of this is going to be timestamped down below, guys, so if you want to skip around the video because you've heard some of this before, then by all means feel free. The game is going to be releasing, by the way, for everybody tomorrow. It's going to be free to play then, so if you're interested in hopping into Stormgate, you've been a little bit on the fence perhaps, you didn't want to commit any money to the game, then now is your chance to jump in. I will be putting out a guide for all 3 factions in the game to get you started on the new patch tomorrow, so keep your eyes peeled to the channel here. And on that note, if you guys do enjoy the content here on the channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well. There's going to be plenty more to come on Stormgate here in the future, guides, casts, build orders, all of that good stuff. So if that's something that interests you, then feel free to subscribe. As always guys, thank you so much for the support. So I wanted to begin here by showing you guys the brand new stats page over on Untapped. Now some of you who've already played the game may have noticed a leaderboard tab in the game, and if you come here over to the leaderboard, that's where it's going to be pulling all of these statistics straight from this API here. However, you can now log directly into the website, so you log in with your Steam account. If you do that, it's going to ask you to create an Untapped.gg account. If you already have an account for Untapped.gg, it's going to ask you to connect your Steam account. Once you've done that, then you can come to your profile and you can see a wealth of information here. So you can see your win-loss rate for all 3 of the factions. As you guys can see, I haven't really played too many games because I've been so busy making content and casting games and watching games and stuff, but I do plan to work on that. You can see a visual representation of your MMR, how it's been going up and down. You can see your win rate by matchup, you can see your win rate by maps as well. And then if we go and click on an opponent here, let's click on this guy, it's Rakaj. We can now see some information about this guy, so he's in Platinum 2 at the moment. You will notice, however, if we come back to my profile, that you can only see the match history for your own profile, and this is the reason here. It is set as private by default, so if you want to change that, you can go ahead and set it to public, but heads up, it's going to be private for almost everybody. So that's pretty cool, definitely similar to what we've seen in StarCraft 2. I do hope they're going to port this in-game. Of course, at the moment, we can see the top 500 leaderboard in-game that's taken directly from that API, so I can only assume that that is their end goal here. They're going to have all of these statistics available there, because let's face it, most players aren't going to bother going to a third-party website to look up stuff like this, right? They just play and look within the game itself. Alright, moving on, let's tackle some of the critical feedback, let's say, around the campaign. I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword for Stormgate because, on the one hand, they need to get some content in the game that they can monetize, and they've decided that the campaign and the co-op heroes are going to be those parts of the game for them. However, these are probably parts of the game that have seen the least development time so far, or at least seem to be the least polished. I've always said that if this game would have released with only the 1v1 mode, it would probably have way higher ratings on Steam than it currently does, and that is the feedback I constantly see around the game, that the 1v1 mode is fantastic, it's really good and fleshed out, but most of the people who are just jumping in for the campaign aren't having that great of an experience. And so Tim Campbell has actually taken here and he's put out an article detailing the road ahead for the campaign. He is one of the co-founders of Frost Giant Games, and I believe he was also a level designer on the original Warcraft 3 and also the expansion for that game, The Frozen Throne. So I think it's fair to say that one of the biggest criticisms was on the artwork, not just for the campaign, but for the game in general. This is what he had to say on it here. So he says, in terms of visuals, we will continue to make changes and improvements throughout early access and beyond, and you can expect to see more art improvements as we move towards 1.0. These changes will be across the board, including lighting, environments, ground textures, units, buildings, resources, UI, and more. We will update and improve some things while outright replacing others. So here are a few things that are going to be sort of top priority for them. Starting with the cinematic characters. I know a lot of people looked at those cinematics for Stormgate and they probably thought it would be better if they hadn't been shown at all because they were just so low par really compared to other RTS games, but there's some good reasons for that. So it says, as we start to replace gameplay models in story sequences with cinematic models, we'll be adding facial animations and lip syncing, as well as bringing limb proportion into a more realistic range. Yes, this includes some of those beefy forearms. We're also going to revisit the shaky cam to help make it feel better. These improvements have always been planned, but we are accelerating the timetable for them in our schedule because of your feedback. And to go into a little bit more detail here of why they use these particular models and this particular camera distance and everything for the cinematics, they say that generally speaking in RTS games, they can use upwards of like 3 to 4 different versions of each main character that are optimized for various specific use cases, such as maximizing legibility at a distant isometric gameplay camera like you see when you're actually playing Stormgate. And that's really what has led to these weird looking characters that have these strange looking heads and these overly proportioned forearms and things like that. It's because these character models are designed to be seen from a top-down perspective so that you can see them in the regular Stormgate camera. They're not designed to be used in this sort of close-up cam that they've been using for the cinematics, and so they really need to change out the character models there, and that's something they are going to be doing. Now, they're also planning to introduce some new war-torn skins for each of the Vanguard units that will update their appearance to better reflect their origins as the human resistance. So there's been a lot of feedback that the Vanguard don't really look like they're some sort of human scrappy race. They don't really seem to be run down in any way or damaged or muddy, and so these are some of the new units that are going to be implemented and retroactively put into the campaign after the fact. Personally, I think they look pretty good. I think it's definitely a good direction. Now they don't look quite as pristine, let's say, as they did before. Now, there are also going to be some additional improvements, so he says we're also going to be revisiting the mission briefings themselves, updating the videos, revisiting specific scripts and voiceovers, changing how items work, changing mission objectives and scripted events, and otherwise polishing the campaigns in a lot of different ways beyond purely visual updates. We look forward to sharing more details about these new features and updates on the road ahead. And then on the topic of story here, he says a number of you have also shared concerns about Stormgate's storyline feeling too familiar. Understandably, you want this new RTS to explore fresh narratives and establish a truly new world. I want to acknowledge that we hear your concerns and that we fundamentally agree. So for anyone who's not played the campaign, it is strikingly similar, at least to me, to Warcraft 3's The Frozen Throne. If you've never played that, you may not see any similarities, and it is worth mentioning again that Tim Campbell was involved in the development of that particular game and that particular campaign. However, he continues here saying, it's fair feedback that our starting point invites a lot of direct comparisons. As with our factions, we started with some consciously familiar reference points, but please consider that the first few steps of many heroes' journeys often look similar. We've only just begun our characters' story arcs, and we have way more in store for each of them as their journeys continue to unfold. And I guess that's fair, right? If you think about the same thing with movies, you can often compare the role that one character plays in one movie to another and say, oh, well, they're just copying from each other, and perhaps don't receive the same sort of criticism that Stormgate is here. And then specifically on the characters here, he says, you've also clearly let us know that our characters, specifically Amara, so that's the protagonist, can benefit from additional developments to further flesh them out. We plan to start with Amara and then advance through other characters, including combing through her dialogue, rewriting some of her lines, and re-recording some of her voiceover to strengthen the character's portrayal and make sure that her perspective on the Vanguard story is engaging. There are some very cool things in store for Amara in the future, and we will continue to invest effort into further development to refine her presence throughout the early missions. So that's pretty cool. It sounds like they're going to take the same approach to all of the characters. Some of the characters I didn't really mind as much. I think Wars was pretty, had some pretty nice voiceover acting there by Simu Liu. I also thought Malak was, really well done by Chris Metzen. I particularly enjoyed that cinematic with the two of them discussing there, and that seemed to be of a much higher quality level than the rest of the cinematics. But I do agree, Amara was probably maybe one of the weaker performances, and since she is the protagonist, then she definitely needs a bit of work, so good to hear that that is going to happen. And then finally here, he's talking about a new hero system for the game. So They say that they've finished prototyping a hero leveling system that enables characters to advance in levels during gameplay, gradually becoming more and more powerful and choosing between which abilities they unlock or customize. So this system provides more choices to unlock than can ever actually be attained at the same time, so fully leveled heroes will not have access to every possible option, and it's also going to persist across missions, so you're going to need to make some tough decisions throughout the campaign. So this is going to offer replayability, right? As you go through there, similar to StarCraft 2, right, you're going to have to choose certain upgrades for your faction, and that means you're going to be able to replay through the campaign and perhaps choose the other ones. They're also going to extend the co-op gear system into the campaign missions, which will further increase replayability. I really do feel like they need to add some achievements though. For campaign players, I feel like in RTS games, most people will go through the campaign on a normal difficulty, then they'll try and tackle the whole thing on brutal, and then they'll have all of the little weird achievements like, you know, complete this campaign without losing a single marine, or whatever it happens to be. Really, really difficult achievements. I know there are players out there, these achievement hunter type of people, who do enjoy that kind of stuff. And, well, you know, since they are charging money for the campaign in Stormgate, I think they need to find as many ways as possible to add added layers of replayability. Okay, so moving on to the patch notes here, let's take a look at some of these. I know the patch is already in the game and many of you guys will have experienced it, so I'm not going to go over absolutely everything, but I do want to touch on a couple of the most interesting changes in my eyes and some of the feedback from Kevin Dong here, who is the balance guy basically for 1v1. So the biggest change, I think, is to Sovereign's Watch, which is like the top bar zappy ability. It's supposed to be a defensive ability for the Celestials, but we of course saw it being used offensively in a lot of rush games. And so they've now changed it so that instead of being castable on any structure, you can only cast it on structures within 15 range away from one of your collection arrays that is harvesting Luminite, which means you can only really use it defensively. The reason behind this is that basically most of these offensive rushes that we saw, proxies and things of that nature, or strike nodes going down, kind of hinged on Sovereign's Watch being usable, and that would stop the enemy player being able to shut down that rush or that proxy attack early enough before it overwhelmed them. Sovereign's Watch was stopping that from happening, so I really like this change. However, they also decreased the duration of it, and they've increased the damage of it a little bit as well, so it lasts for shorter duration now, but does more damage. But one of the really interesting ones to me here is that you can now cast it on a flying arc ship, so you are effectively still able to do these rushes as long as you take your arc ship over there. And what's more, it's going to be even more effective because now you can cast Sovereign's Watch, but then move your arc ship in and out of range of where the enemy units are and essentially chase them around the map or into their base. It's kind of like the way it was back in Frigate, where you could land your arc ship anywhere, get the Sovereign's Watch down, and you would often see scouts blocking the arc ship wherever it went to stop them from landing. Now you don't even have to land the arc ship, you can use Sovereign's Watch on it while it's flying around. So that's kind of really interesting to me. I guess you are putting yourself somewhat at risk, right? If you are heading up your army with the arc ship, it is in great danger of being sniped off as well, so there's a little bit more risk reward there. They've also, of course, made a massive change to the Morph core, so damage has been decreased from 8 down to 2, but then plus 6 versus light. So damage versus light targets is essentially going to be the same for the Morph core, so it's going to be good at defending against things like scouts or, you know, exos. I don't know why you would want to defend against exos with a Morph core, but you know what I'm trying to say. Against buildings, though, it's only going to do 2 damage now instead of 8, and that was really the crux of these kind of builds that we saw with a mass Morph core, especially on close by air maps like Jagged Moor. People would just build a bunch of Morph cores, send them across the map there, and basically snipe down enemy sentry turrets before they were able to get up and functional. So that's no longer going to be possible. Great change there. I think the last thing anybody wants is for new players to come into the game tomorrow and the first thing they encounter in a 1v1 is a Morph core rush. So good stuff. There was also a pretty big nerf here to the Kri, so they no longer get this bonus armor while rolling. Previously they had plus 50 armor rolling around, and they could literally just roll past an entire Deathball army without really taking so much as a scratch, so I'm not too surprised to see that being taken away. That was added after Frigate, and so now that's been rolled back, and their damage has been changed from 24 down to 16 plus light. So similar to the Morph core here, we are seeing some of that total damage shifted into the light category, so they are still going to be very effective against light units like gaunts and workers and whatnot, but not so much against some of those heavier units, so they are going to be more directly countered, let's say, by things like the Vulcan or the Lancer or the Brute. We're probably going to see a lot of heavy Lancer play come out of Vanguard players too, because the kinetic redirection upgrade, which is the one where when they take damage, it increases their movement speed and allows them to really, run down the enemy army much faster. That has now been changed, so you don't need the central command. So you never used to need the central command. They, I believe, only introduced this in early access, and now they've rolled that back. But the research time is going to go up from 60 seconds to 90, so you are going to be able to get that straight from the biolab early on in the game, but it is going to take you 90 seconds to research it. And we've seen something very similar here for the Gaunt, so the Plague Axe, which gives them the ability to infest, has basically been increased from 60 seconds to 90 seconds on the duration there, so it's going to take you a little bit longer to get that upgrade going, and some of your, builds that may have been working previously may need a bit of tweaking there. So I think especially in Vanguard versus Infernal now, you're going to see a lot more early openings with Lancers with the kinetic redirection upgrade, and that's going to allow them to really run down some of the Gaunts and make use of that splash damage there to kill them, especially if the Gaunts don't have the Plague Axe research up and running there. But, since both of these do take 90 seconds to research, you can pretty much be expecting both Plague Axes and then kinetic redirection on the side of the Vanguard to be coming up at roughly the same time. The Exos have also seen a pretty big nerf here. Damage has been decreased from 14 plus 8 heavy down to 13 plus 6 heavy. So a total nerf of 3 DPS there versus a heavy target in total. Pretty rough. I mean, they were very, very good. Excellent at sniping brutes and just sort of kiting them away. So they're not quite going to be as good as they were previously. Now, this change kind of surprised me here. The Scythes for the Celestials. This is one of my favorite units in the game right now. Damage against air units has been increased by 8 plus 8 heavy to 12 plus 12 heavy. So this is specifically against air units, I think, and it now says it's also going to prioritize attacking air units. The Scythes are actually really, really powerful units in the game. I think a lot of people underestimate just how good they can be, and really their main counter, at least against Vanguard, were the Hornets, because the Hornets do extra damage against air units, so they were pretty much a hard counter to the Scythe. Maybe not the case anymore though. I like these changes to the Saber as well, so the Mass Accelerator that increases their movement speed, that no longer costs you 100 health anymore, but the cooldown has been increased from 0 seconds to 20, so instead of it costing you health, it just has a cooldown. I think that's better, if you've got a cooldown on something, it makes you more likely to use it. If it's kind of going to gimp your health pool and reduce it by 100 health though, that's not really as lucrative there. Damage has also been increased here by 48 plus 40 heavy to 52 plus 52 heavy. So that's plus 12 plus another 4. That's plus 16 damage now it's going to be doing against heavy targets. So that is quite a big buff there to the Saber. They've also had some pretty nice tuning changes here to the creep camps. So they were really buffed coming into early access. Both the rewards and how much damage they deal, how much health they had, was severely increased. So even a level 2 creep camp was pretty much uncappable early in the game unless you had a bunch of units. So they are rolling back some of the damage here. So damage has been decreased sort of across the board for most of the creeps here, giving you a little bit of a better chance to actually claim some of them. And interestingly, the rewards for them have been increased. So it's going to be easier to cap creep camps, and you're going to get even more rewards than you did before. So they're further trying to incentivize you getting out on the map early game and getting some of those creep camps. They've also buffed some of the lesser used units in the game, so apparently the Hedgehog hasn't been seeing much use. That's kind of a surprise to me, and they have changed the weapon period, decreased it from 0.4 to 0.3, so it's now going to attack roughly 25% faster, I believe. The Hornet has seen a health increase from 180 to 210. The Weaver has had its lash energy cost decreased from 50 to 40, and the weapon damage has been increased from 10% of a unit's max health up to 15%, and 10% now versus structures as well. And then they've also fixed a number of prominent bugs here. So first of all, they fixed an issue where the slimes and the oozes did not grant a resource bounty. So for anybody who has watched my recent guide on the economy of Stormgate, I did note there that you didn't get any resources from these. Turns out that was just a bug, so I'll have to make an amendment in that video. Also, morphing to an arc ship with a morph core now correctly costs 200 luminite, which is basically 300 because the morph core costs 300. It was costing 100, so you could actually get a brand new arc ship for just the cost of 200 luminite, 100 plus 100 for the morph core. And I know that Probe, especially if you guys watched the Tasteless Showdown, he was abusing that bug a hell of a lot there. In fact, I think he got a second arc ship in almost every game so he could construct prisms much faster. Of course, you know, he didn't know it was a bug though, right? So I'm not calling him out or anything here. The Seraphim were also taking 50% reduced damage from all sources instead of just the creeps, so that's one of their passive traits that they take half damage from creeps. That was actually affecting every single unit in the game, so that's been changed now. But yeah, some pretty good changes there. It's really nice to see the team jumping on these pretty soon after early access began. What has it been, like, I don't know, a week and a half, something like that it took them to get this patch out. So I would say that's pretty much as fast as you can expect to see a patch of this size, really, with this many notable changes go in there. So they've reacted snappily to this just before early access gets out, and it's going to go free to play for everybody, which I think is definitely a good idea. But guys, let me know what you think about all of the news below, whether it be on the patch notes or the campaign or the new stats over on the Untapped Games website. Let me know what you think of that all below, and if you enjoyed the video here today, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Always helps out with the algorithm. But otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a good one, and I'll see you all in the next video.